And first of all, that's Natalie Smolenski, business developer at Learning Machine, a blockchain technology startup. And she will talk about academic credentials in an era of digital decentralization. Natalie?
Thank you. It's a great pleasure to be here. I'm very happy with the size of the turnout here, and looking forward to a short Q&A after this presentation to really dive into the material. So I'll just start by giving you a little bit of background about myself. I am a cultural anthropologist, and I also lead business development for a blockchain startup firm named Learning Machine. And you heard a little bit this morning about the BlockCert standard. Learning Machine cooperated with the MIT Media Lab in 2016 to develop BlockCerts. And what BlockCerts is it's an open source standard for issuing and verifying credentials on the blockchain. We began with the Bitcoin blockchain because it is the most secure chain. And when you're talking about official records, particularly records of learner achievement in the education space, you need things that are going to really endure over a long period of time. We also wanted these records to be maximally portable and interoperable across geographic boundaries, across legacy systems, across new projects that are being developed, new infrastructures. So BlockCerts was released in 2016 to really attend to those possibilities. So today, right now, any vendor, any university, any government, any researcher, individual can pick up the BlockCert standard and build their own applications for issuing and verifying to the blockchain without any credit to Learning Machine or MIT. We released the standard long before a commercial product in order to avoid the problem that often co-occurs with the introduction of new technologies, which is vendor lock-in and standards wars. So you may be familiar with the VHS versus Betamax war of the 80s and how so many people basically lost their media because the standard that they chose didn't end up becoming the industry standard. We didn't want that to happen to learners. And as the Syria conflict has recently demonstrated, the ability to regenerate your credentials and prove ownership when you've had to traverse geographic boundaries, when perhaps you've lost your electronic devices, when perhaps the institutions who have issued to you have failed and can no longer verify your credentials, is of utmost importance from a human capital perspective. So Learning Machine has taken the BlockCert standard and built a series of commercial products to issue onto the blockchain. So we've basically done all of the hard work for the issuer. All the cryptocurrency management, all the public and private key management happens seamlessly behind the scenes. So you as an issuer have a friendly user interface that you can use, and we're going to dive into 3 different case studies of the use of that platform in this short presentation. The first thing that I want to talk about, though, is the recipient wallet. So the magic really happens here in this mobile app that we developed. One of the core problems that we were trying to solve with MIT was the problem of recipient ownership. So today, when a person is issued a credential by a university or by a government, they still rely on that issuing institution to verify the authenticity of that credential. What this means in practice is that they don't actually own their credential. They in effect kind of lease it on behalf of the institution. And this has historically been the case because fraud prevention was a major concern. You can have individuals fabricating credentials, which they do all the time. For example, in the US, about half of all PhDs are fabricated. And it's a very high number. And even more than academic credentials, people fabricate their employment history too, which is something we discovered speaking with some prospects in Australia too. So this problem of credential fraud is widespread. And it's directly connected to the ongoing dependence on the issuing institution. It makes verification expensive, it makes it time-consuming, and it makes it complicated. So we wanted to change all of that. And the blockchain is what really allowed for these things that have traditionally been at odds, fraud prevention and recipient ownership, to finally actually go seamlessly together. And the way it works in the BlockCert standard is through the recipient wallet. This is a mobile app that any of you can go to your app store now on your smartphone and search for BlockCert's wallet and download it. When you download the app, the first thing you'll see is a screen that will give you a private passphrase. That passphrase is connected to your private key, which is generated by the wallet. Now, the whole promise of the blockchain, which began with the Bitcoin blockchain, is that you directly own your assets, whether that's cryptocurrency, whether that's land titles, whether that's credentials. You're the one who owns them. They're not stored for you by a custodian, like a vendor or a separate institution. In order to own your assets, you have to own your private key. Traditionally, this has been quite complex to manage. You basically had to be a software developer to understand how it all worked. Because if you didn't, then you could lose your private key, someone could steal all of your stuff, and there was no way to get it back. So what the recipient wallet does is it makes it super easy to manage your private keys. With that passphrase, you can regenerate your private key anytime you want to import your credentials to a new device. If you lose your device, you can regenerate it, and you can prove that you own them. So if I'm, a student and escaping a war-torn country, and my high school is no longer able to verify that I graduated from that high school, and I lose my phone along the way, whenever I get a new phone or a new device, I can simply enter my private key into the wallet, and all my credentials will be there, and I'll be able to prove that I own them. So what you're seeing here on this slide, these steps, that's also indicating the verification operation that you can perform within the wallet. So there are multiple ways to verify the authenticity of BlockCerts. One way is through the wallet. There's actually a verify button, as you can see right there at the bottom of the wallet. When you click that button, there are three things that are being checked for. One is to make sure that the certificate in the wallet matches the certificate that was hashed to the blockchain. So, as you may be aware, if you change even a single pixel in a certificate, the resulting content hash is completely different. So it's checking to make sure that these certificates have not been tampered with in any way. The second thing it's checking for is to make sure that the certificate hasn't been revoked. So you can revoke certificates using the BlockCert standard as an issuer, whether you've issued them in error or as part of a disciplinary action, for example. And then the third thing it's checking for is to make sure the certificate has not expired. So when you issue a certificate, you can actually set an expiration date and time, and the verifier will check automatically to make sure that the certificate is still valid. And you can do that within the app. You can also do that with the web view of the certificate. So the one that you're seeing in the app here can easily be exported as a link that you can send to employers, to admissions committees, to friends and family. You can post it on your Facebook profile or on your LinkedIn profile. And that certificate has a verification button that's conducting the same operation that the mobile app is. And then a third way to verify is through an independent verification portal. And these are things that Learning Machine builds for our customers. So in some situations, you could conceivably have a very sophisticated user who's able to spoof a website that looks like a certificate and looks like it's verifying when it's actually not. In order to prevent that for high stakes situations, you would go to the verification portal of the issuing organization and paste in the link to the certificate or upload the JSON file, the actual certificate file, and that independent verification portal will conduct the same three-step verification process to confirm authenticity. So there are multiple ways to verify, and verification is independent. So you can use the block cert standard to verify, even if learning machine goes away, even if the issuing institution goes away, the documents remain verifiable indefinitely. So what are the applications of this? Learning Machine actually grew out of a company whose specialization was in higher education, a company called Slide Room that makes admissions systems. So higher education has always been a very intuitive space for us. We kind of understand the needs. Indeed, the block cert standard grew out of a collaboration with a university, with MIT, who was concerned that their graduates didn't actually own their credentials of achievement. But there are also applications across industries. So we've been working closely with governments, with workforce development in corporations and companies like banks and retail, and professional licensure organizations, so professional membership organizations. So let me talk a little bit about some of these examples to kind of give you a sense for what's possible. I'll start with MIT, which is a good example for higher education. They issued their first batches of blockchain credentials to students this summer, to the Sloan School of Business and Media Lab graduates. This is an example of a Master of Finance or a diploma that is using the MIT format. All of the security features are, of course, behind the scenes. So you're not needing to watermark this in the way that you would a paper diploma or a PDF. It's all happening cryptographically. Another major example is the Republic of Malta. So this fall, we're getting ready to begin a year-long pilot with the Maltese Ministry of Education and Employment. So Learning Machine is a US company, but we also have a regional subsidiary that's based in the EU in Malta. Their ministry was very interested in giving Maltese citizens easily portable credentials that could translate seamlessly across all levels of education and then from education to the workforce. So what you're seeing here in this illustration is an example of a governance portal that Learning Machine has built for large institutions that need to manage many different issuing organizations. These could be universities, they could be governments, they could be companies, but this portal gives you a bird's eye view of all of the issuing activity that is occurring across your systems. You're also able to see roll-up analytics on the number of certificates being issued every day, your main issuing organizations, the number of times that your certificates are being shared and verified, the platforms that they're being predominantly shared to, the mobile platforms used by your recipient base, and the percentage of response that you're getting. So the issuing process is actually invitation-based. You have to invite recipients to send you, the issuing institution, their public keys, and that establishes the relationship that then allows you to issue to them. So it's all opt-in. There's no coercion, and all of the certificates that are sent to recipients are completely private. So it's a direct peer-to-peer transaction from the issuing institution to the recipient. Learning Machine doesn't store the certificates, it doesn't own the recipient data. You don't have to create an account with Learning Machine to use the software, to use the wallet. It's all direct. And we had a few speakers this morning mention the principle of self-sovereign identity. That's the rationale behind that. And this is anticipating in some ways the GDPR, which comes into effect next year in May, where privacy by design is one of the major principles that they're asking companies to keep in mind as they're formulating software. So it's not an add-on, but in fact built in from the ground up. And the legislation itself was formulated kind of just prior to the introduction of blockchain, or not to the introduction, but to blockchain really becoming top of mind for many people. But blockchain applications have the potential to realize the values of the GDPR in ways that legacy software will have trouble doing. So the real question, though, when you're talking about application of blockchain technologies is how are they being applied at the application layer? The nature of the application that's making use of the blockchain can really make or break whether or not it's a privacy-enhancing solution or the opposite. So to give you an example, there are many corporations out there that are claiming to log or anchor credentials onto the blockchain. But often the software is kind of a black box, so you're not really sure what is going on the blockchain, and recipients don't actually own their public keys, so they don't own the credentials, and there's an ongoing vendor dependency that's being created there. The BlockCert standard was introduced to prevent that from happening, so that issuing institutions and governments aren't locked into a particular vendor solution, but can go with any standards-based approach. So what you're seeing here is just the learning machine facilitation of using BlockCerts across a very large body. And then the last case I just wanted to talk to you about is the Federation of State Medical Boards in the United States, which is a professional membership organization. They do credential verification for physicians across all the different state medical boards. This fall, working with us, there are 3 credentials that they're interested in pilot issuing. One is a verification of medical education. The other is a verification of graduate medical education, which includes things like behavior validation, assessment, making sure that this person has achieved the education that they claim to have achieved and is also of sound mind and a good professional. And then finally, state medical licenses. So with this, we're beginning to get into a human resources application, particularly in the healthcare field, where making sure that your credentials are up to date is very important. So many of these credentials expire and need to be renewed at regular intervals, which makes them ideal use cases for BlockCerts. So that's really it. That's an overview of what we do and 3 high-level use cases. And at this point, I'd like to just open it up to the audience for questions and discussion.